Have you ever looked at an executive and wondered, how did they get there? What exactly separates someone who stays in middle management from the person who eventually leads the organization? Most people think it's luck, a fancy MBA, or being in the right place at the right time. But here's the truth. Executive leadership isn't a single promotion. It's a series of turning points. Moments when you either step up or step back. Moments when you start thinking differently, not just about your role, but about the entire organization. And in today's episode of the Work Chat, we're breaking down those critical turning points, the mindset shifts, the career pivots, and the defining experiences that shape you into an executive leader. By the end of this episode, you'll see that leadership isn't something that happens to you. It's something you grow into, one decision at a time. Let's get started. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Work Chat. Today we're exploring the critical turning points that shape someone's journey from manager to executive leader. Let's start with turning point number 1, when you stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like an owner. Most people enter the workforce focused on tasks. You do your assignments, you meet deadlines, you follow directions. But there comes a moment, a subtle but life-changing one, when you stop asking, what do I need to do? And start asking, what are we trying to achieve as a company? That's the first turning point. For example, I once worked with a senior analyst who constantly went above her job description. When others waited for direction, she asked, what's the business impact if we do this? Over time, leaders started seeing her not as an employee, but as someone who thought like an owner. Within 2 years, she was promoted to director, and today she's a VP. That shift, from task execution to business impact, is the foundation of executive leadership. Executives don't just do their job, they connect their job to the company's strategy. Turning point. Number 2, when you realize people skills outweigh technical skills. Early in your career, you get promoted for what you know. But once you start managing others, your success depends on what you can get others to know and do. That's the second turning point, when you realize technical expertise alone won't get you to the top. At the executive level, emotional intelligence, empathy, and communication are the real power skills. For example, I knew a brilliant operations manager who could solve any problem alone, but she struggled to influence peers, delegate tasks, and build trust. Once she learned how to coach instead of control, her entire career accelerated. Leadership isn't just about intelligence, it's about influence. The higher you go, the more your results depend on how you make other people feel, how you guide them, and how you align them toward a shared goal. Executives don't just manage, they mobilize. Number 3, when you learn to navigate organizational politics the right way. Let's be honest, many people hate the word politics. They think it means manipulation or favoritism. But at the executive level, politics isn't about playing games, it's about building alliances. You can't lead a company if you're operating in isolation. For example, I once saw 2 directors with equal talent. One kept his head down, focusing only on his team. The other built relationships across finance, HR, and marketing. Guess who got tapped for VP first? It wasn't about favoritism, it was about visibility and trust. The people who reach the executive level are the ones who understand that leadership doesn't happen in a silo. They know how to build influence horizontally, across departments and vertically with decision makers. They don't just say yes to politics, they redefine it as strategic collaboration. Turning point number 4, when you learn to bridge the gap between executives and your team. This is one of the most critical and misunderstood leadership moments, when you realize your job isn't to shield your team from leadership, but to connect your team to leadership. Many new managers believe their role is to protect their team at all costs. They say things like, my team doesn't have time for that. That's not really our job. They're too overwhelmed already. It often comes from a good place. They care deeply about their people. But over time, this mindset isolates the team. It creates an invisible wall between employees and executives. At the executive level, great leaders understand that their job is to translate, not block. I once worked with a department manager who pushed back on nearly every cross-functional request. She believed she was shielding her team from burnout, but in reality, she was cutting them off from visibility, influence, and growth opportunities. When she reframed her role, everything changed. Instead of saying, "My team can't," she started saying, "Here's what my team would need to make this successful." That subtle language shift turned her from a blocker into a bridge. She became someone executives could rely on, and someone her team trusted to represent them fairly while driving results. That's the turning point, when you stop standing between executives and your team and start standing with both, helping each side understand the other. That's when you move from being a middle manager to a true organizational leader. Turning point number 5, when you start thinking 3 steps ahead. At some point in your career, you'll realize you're no longer just solving today's problems, you're anticipating tomorrow's. Executives are always scanning for what's next, what's changing in the market, what risks are coming down the line, how will technology or regulation shift our direction. That's the next turning point, strategic foresight. For example, one healthcare director I worked with started proactively mapping out the impact of new state policies before anyone else was even talking about them. When those policies hit, she was ready. She wasn't just managing change, she was leading it. And that's what made her stand out. Executives earn their seat at the table, not because they react fast, but because they think ahead. Turning point number 6, when you shift from I to we. Early in your career, success is about you, your performance, your projects, your wins. But at the executive level, success is collective. It's no longer what did I accomplish, it's what did we build together. I once heard an executive say, "If my team isn't growing, I'm failing." That's the mindset that gets noticed. Executives develop other leaders. They don't hoard control, they distribute it. They don't chase personal recognition, they create environments where others shine. When you start measuring your success by how well others perform under your guidance, that's when you cross the line from manager to leader. Turning point number 7, when you stop needing permission. There's a pivotal moment in every leader's journey when you realize you don't need someone else to tell you what leadership looks like. You define it for yourself. You stop waiting for someone to tap you on the shoulder. You stop asking, "Can I do this?" And you start saying, "This needs to be done, and I'll take it on." For example, a mid-level marketing manager I know started leading major initiatives even before she had the title. She built cross-functional partnerships, presented data to senior leadership, and made recommendations that shaped strategy. Within a year, she was promoted because she was already doing the job she wanted before anyone gave her permission. Executives don't wait for authority. They earn it by acting with initiative and ownership. Turning point number 8, when you learn to communicate vision clearly. At the executive level, clarity is power. You might have the best ideas in the world, but if you can't articulate them in a way that aligns, inspires, and mobilizes people, they'll stay stuck in your head. That's why great executives master strategic communication. They know how to speak to different audiences. To their team, they're clear and motivating. To the board, they're concise and data-driven. To the public, they're visionary and authentic. I once worked with a VP who had a simple rule. If you can't explain your idea in 3 sentences that your team actually understands, you don't understand it well enough. That clarity made her one of the most trusted voices in the company. People didn't just hear her, they followed her. Great executives communicate to connect, not to impress. Turning point number 9. When you understand that leadership is a responsibility, not a reward. By the time you reach executive leadership, you realize something humbling. This isn't about the title, the office, or the paycheck. It's about stewardship. Executives carry the weight of people's livelihoods, the organization's reputation, and the direction of its future. I remember a COO I once worked with said, "My biggest job isn't to run the business. It's to make sure my people have what they need to run it well." That's the mindset that sustains leadership. Real executives don't climb the ladder chasing status. They climb it to create impact. They're driven by purpose, not position. We've covered a lot today, so let's take a quick moment to recap the key turning points that define every great leader. You stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like an owner. You realize people skills matter more than technical skills. You navigate politics with integrity and build alliances. You bridge the gap between executives and your team. You think 3 steps ahead. You shift from I to we. You stop waiting for permission. You communicate vision clearly. And above all, you understand leadership as a responsibility, not a reward. These aren't instant promotions, they're transformations, each one reshaping how you think, act, and lead. So if you're on your way up the leadership ladder, ask yourself, which turning point are you at right now? Because recognizing it might just be the key to unlocking the next one. That's a wrap for today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, hit like and subscribe to the Work Chat for more leadership insights, workplace strategies, and career growth stories. And tell us in the comments, what was the biggest turning point in your career so far? Thanks for tuning in, and remember, leadership isn't a destination. It's a series of choices that define who you become. See you in the next episode.